What about second breakfast?
Time for second breakfast.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Second Breakfast, hosted by yours truly, Monster, from Breakdowns for Breakfast. This episode, I'm going to do something kind of interesting. We recently did an episode on the newest Killswitch Engage album, and I made a comment about how the history of Killswitch Engage is kind of the history of modern metalcore, at least of that particular flavor. So I thought, what better way to give that history than through this new avenue, this Second Breakfast show. So I wanted to go through and kind of go through, like I said, the history of Killswitch Engage, which sort of parlays into the history of New England Metalcore and that particular flavor of metalcore. So I want to start by saying I got a lot of this information from a Killswitch Engage DVD that I had back when I was younger. It was one of those DVDs that had a full-length concert, but it also had a documentary on it called From the Bedroom to the Basement, which was a kind of a joke about how early days of Killswitch, they performed in Joel's in his bedroom, real small little room, and then as they got more popular and a little bit bigger, they got to practice in the basement instead, where it was a lot bigger space. But you know, I can relate to that. You know, we've mentioned on the show before, my bands used to practice at my mom and dad's house. It was the living room that we inadvertently took over, and it became the band room. So could relate to that and thought it was really cool. But that, on the Killswitch Engage episode, I talk about how much I loved their early stuff and the first couple records, and a lot of that was from their personalities, and a lot of that I got from that DVD. So I went back. It's all on YouTube now, but I went back and I looked it up, watched some of it to get this information, and thought I would just kind of go through it here for you. So, first, there was a band called Overcast, which featured Mike D and Pete Cortez, and he was the rhythm guitar player for Killswitch from 2000 to 2001. It also featured Brian Fair on vocals. Now, if that name sounds familiar, is because he becomes the lead singer of Shadows Fall, which is another band from this era that I was a big fan of, the first couple records. They were kind of not necessarily the first metalcore band, but they were essentially a hardcore band that were throwing in these like metal guitar riffs. And this band lasted for about 8 years, and then the drummer quit and the band sort of fell apart. Well, then there was another band which featured Adam D, Joel from Killswitch, and Tom Gomez, the drummer from Killswitch from 2002 to 2003. And this band was called Aftershock. Now, also in Aftershock was John Denius, who would later on go on to join up with Brian Fair in Shadows Fall. Now, Adam D even played drums on the first Shadows Fall demo, which we kind of got into this a little bit, but Adam D had his fingers in metalcore everywhere during this time. And not just this flavor of it either. He would go on to produce albums like Suck Out the Poison by He Is Legend. He did Bless the Child, Kiss the Martyr, or whatever that Norma Jean record was. He did an Under Oath album. He did a Parkway Drive album. So even though he was playing in these bands, he was still working and producing those bands. So he was all over this scene and in both kind of forms of it. So Aftershock takes a break, and that's when Shadows Fall is formed. So Adam D wanted to get Aftershock back together. John said no, and that's when Joel took over on guitar. So now Joel and Adam are playing together with Aftershock. So after that, Adam D and Mike D, the bass player from Killswitch Engage, get together a couple years later and start jamming. Adam was on drums and Mike was on bass. So Adam and Mike went to Joel from Aftershock with some new stuff they were writing and was like, hey, this is going to be our new band. They joke about telling him it's an Aftershock practice, and when he gets there, they don't play any Aftershock songs. They're like, hey, we're going to play all these new songs. And Joel's just super chill and is like, sure, why not? So These three dudes basically wrote the entire first Killswitch album. And they didn't have a singer. So you got Adam on drums, Joel on guitar, Mike on bass, no vocals. So Adam D's brother owned a record label, and one of the bands on that record label was a band called Nothing Stays Gold. The lead singer of that band was Jesse Leach. So they get a hold of Jesse Leach. He comes down. He checks out the songs. He really likes it. So they do their first record as a 4-piece. And then during the second recording, the second album, they're doing all of this guitar stuff. And it was like, there's no way we can play this as a 4-piece. So on the record, there's all these layers of guitar, but it's all just one guitar player. So Adam D basically says, I'm tired of lugging my drums around. I'd rather run around on stage and be goofy and play guitar. So Adam D moves to the second guitar position. You got Joel and Adam now on guitar, and they called their buddy Tom, who was in Aftershock, and said, why don't you come down and play drums? So that's the lineup after the second album comes out and they start touring. Well, while on tour, Jesse, the vocalist, gets really super depressed. He misses his wife terribly. He started having his throat wouldn't hold up for very long. Just a lot of stuff was going on. There's also some talk about some of the other guys were kind of drinking and partying, and he wasn't feeling any of that. So he just up and quit one day. I think they had like 1 or 2 dates left, and he wrote an email basically saying, I'm done with this. I'm done with music, and I just can't go on. And, you know, these guys are the chillest dudes in the world, and when you hear them talk about this, Adam D, Jesse, all of them are just kind of like, what are you going to do? You quit. We got to move on, figure out what we're going to do. So the first person they called was Brian from Shadows Fall, and Brian basically said, dude, I would love to do it, but Shadows Fall is taking off, and I'm just too busy. I couldn't pull double duty right now. And so then they had Phil Labonte, the lead vocalist from All That Remains, try out. And I don't know if you've really listened to All That Remains, but not that dissimilar to Killswitch, Shadows Fall, heavy metalcore, but, you know, a lot of clean vocal mixed in too. He's a good singer. And he, for all intents and purposes, looked like he was going to be the guy until another guy happened to show up. So now there's this band called Blood Has Been Shed, and it features a guy named Howard Jones on vocals and a guy named Justin Foley on drums. So Howard Jones ends up coming in and just blowing the roof off the place and becomes the new lead singer. And so the band toured for a couple years, basically just doing the old material. And Tom, the drummer at the time, decided he wanted to step down. It just wasn't fun for him anymore. And so as soon as that happened, Howard was like, I know a guy. And they called up his buddy Justin from Blood Has Been Shed. And so now he's in the band. So that's it. That's Killswitch from there on out. Until January 4th of 2012, that's when Howard Jones said he was ready to quit. So they had the same lineup for 9 years. And when he first quit, they didn't really give a whole lot of explanation. It was just, you know, he was ready to move on. Turns out he had type 2 diabetes, and touring was just non-deducive to his lifestyle. Like he couldn't manage his diabetes on the road with that kind of a lifestyle, and I can understand that. So then there were rumors floating around that Phil from All That Remains would possibly be taking over lead vocals, because he was almost the lead vocalist to, you know, begin with. Well, just in the search for vocalists, Jesse Leach, the original vocalist, kind of came back in and wanted to audition. And what's crazy is it wasn't like, oh my God, Jesse came back. Yeah, he's the singer. He had to try out like everybody else. And what's really funny is there's a really cool podcast called the Garza podcast with I can't remember obviously his name's Garza, but I think he's the guitar player for Suicide Silence, but he's a really sweet dude, and he gets a lot of big metal and hardcore rock guys on there, and he just recently did an interview with Adam D. And in that interview, Adam D's talking about when Howard left, they spent several days trying out all these different singers, and Jesse was just one of the guys that, tried out. And Adam said Jesse sang all the old songs perfectly, and it was great. But he told Adam, he was like, I don't know that I really want to sing Howard's songs. And Adam basically told him, well, then you're not going to be in the band. Like, you're going to come back and not sing our biggest songs just because you didn't write the words? That's not going to work. So basically, Jesse said, well, okay, I'll give it a shot. And it was comfortable enough that he was like, okay, that's fine. I can do that. So I'll end with this last quote from Adam D that I thought was just absolutely hysterical. So an interview from 2014, I'm not sure what the interview was. I just happened to stumble upon it on YouTube. Adam D and Jesse are sitting there hanging out. And the question was something along the lines of, how has the band changed since Jesse left and then rejoined again? And Adam D is incredibly funny. If you've never seen him in an interview or anything, look that up. He's a lot of fun. But his response was, people started liking us, and then we had a black dude write a bunch of songs about chicks, and then more people liked us, and then Jesse came back, and everything's good. There you go. That's the history of Killswitch Engage, summed up in one sentence by our friend Adam D. But yeah, I thought that was fascinating. And as a fan of All That Remains and Shadows Fall and Every Time I Die and Lamb of God, all of these bands were buddies. And all these bands played shows together. And half the time they were sharing band members and stuff. And, you see that a lot of times. As a local musician, I've seen this happen, but it's always very small time, low key bands. You go see your buddy's band and you're like, oh, that's their bass player now. I played with him in this band, blah, blah, blah. But to see it at such a big scale, I think was kind of cool. So there you go. If you didn't know the history of Killswitch Engage, New England Metalcore, that's a little bit of it right there. So I hope you enjoyed that little history lesson, and I hope you enjoyed the breakdown for breakfast episode on the new Killswitch record. And if you got any ideas, anything you'd like to hear me talk about, some other band histories or something, just let me know. Happy to do it. Y'all have a great day. Later.